What's up, guys? So today we have Phil Daru on the podcast, who is a strength and conditioning coach down in ATT, down in Florida, American Top Team, and he coaches some of the top fighters in the world right now that are fighting the UFC and elsewhere. And he has a bunch of really cool insights into training. It was really interesting talking to him because, again, he takes a unique approach to it. He's experienced the sports that he's coaching, and then he's coaching people. So he has this unique thing where he has the experience, and then he's also doing research, and so he has all this theoretical knowledge that's coming in, and he kind of combines them together to put together for these fighters. And as you listen to him, he's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this stuff. And so if you're driving, you may want to go back, and if you hear something that's useful to you, because he'll talk about some tips on how to correct some imbalances and some exercises that you should probably be doing, especially if you're a jiu-jitsu practitioner. So if you're listening to it, you might want to just have your notepad out or on your phone, or maybe if you're sitting down, maybe have a notepad just handy just to write some notes down to check his stuff out later on. But again, it's a really great podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Had a good time talking with him. As always, guys, we are supported on the podcast by Charlotte's Web. It's the CBD oil products that I use. I've got everything from their gummies to their tinctures, and I really like it. Again, I most of the time when I use it, if you're curious, I use it at nighttime when I want to go to sleep. I like just basically having a little bit as I start to go through my nightly ritual, and it seems to help me sleep better. I seem to get just a better restful night's sleep, and it also seems to help with inflammation. I noticed that, like I talked about years ago, I had the reason I started taking CBD was my darn shoulder was jacked up. It was just constantly sore. Had some CBD balm put on it, and voila, it was gone. That was what got me into the whole thing in the first place. And so, again, you can check it out. As always, guys, we have a promo code with them, Jiu-Jitsu, at charlottesweb.com, which you can use. And again, I just sort of use this as a disclaimer. Use whatever CBD oil you want to. Just make sure that if you do use one that's from a reputable company that's been tested, so you know what you're getting, because as it is right now, it's unregulated, and so you could be getting who knows what in your CBD oil. But again, their stuff is legit. It's been tested, and they've got a lot of cool products, so check it out. We're also supported by a new sponsor today, Epic Rolls. So Epic Rolls ran by this guy named Matt, and Matt sent me some gear a few months back. It was a really nice guy, and so I went ahead and started, wearing the gear. I'm like, okay, cool. When someone sends me stuff, I tell you guys this right now, I get sent a lot of stuff that I don't talk about because a lot of times I don't like it, and I'm like, for me, I'm not gonna promote something I don't use or that I don't use. I don't need the money that bad, right? So I'm like, I'm not touching this stuff. So anytime that I bring something to you guys, it's because I use it. And if you guys go watch some of my recent rolling videos, you'll see some of the Epic Roll shorts. I've actually had a couple questions about it. I gave a couple of my students, because he gave me a couple rash guards to try. And I've already got a bunch of rash guards too, so I've been wearing one of the rash guards, but then I gave a couple to my students. My students love them. I really like the shorts. It's good stuff. So again, if you guys want to check out some of Matt's stuff at Epic Roll, check out epicrollbjj.com, and you can save 15% off with the code Jiu-Jitsu. So you can check out his stuff. It's good stuff. And again, you can watch me wear it in the videos. And the last, final plug of this beginning. You probably don't even listen to this part. You probably fast forward it, and you were like, I'm not going to listen to any of this stuff. You're like, I don't want to listen to this. You're just pressing that button, the little 15-second forward button, until you get to the talking. Which if you do that, it's fine. I understand. But if you'd like to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. And on there, we've got everything from videos, I have a full-length seminar that I did up there. Eugene and I have some stretching videos and some different videos that you could use for, sort of loosening different muscles up, things like that. And we also have a lot of audio extras and video extras where we've talked to the guests that are on the podcast. We get a few little morsels, little quick actionable tips to them, and you guys can have those. And in addition to that, Eugene and I go on some rants about some stuff that I think are pretty entertaining. And so if you would like to get your hands on that for just a measly $7 a day, $7 a day, my friend.
Not a day.
$7. That's expensive. You can tell that these promos, by the way, are not rehearsed. I don't read off of a card or anything. But $7 a month, you're like, $7 a day. Damn it, Chewy, that's expensive. You're getting high priced. But for $7 a month, which is 23 cents a day.
Nice math.
So you can be in the Patreon. You can be hanging out with us. I understand that this promo is not going to help anything, and you're not going to do it. All right, guys, I'm done doing all that stuff. You can tell how terrible I am at this. So let's get to the podcast, talk to Phil Daru. It's an awesome podcast. You're going to love it. And, guys, as always, thanks for listening. All right. How you doing today, man?
I'm all right, man. I'm a little tired today. I'm not gonna lie, but I'll be okay.
All
Why
right.
why are you tired?
Oh man, my days are hectic, bro. Days
Wh-
are hectic.
What's a
Uh,
typical day for you? What's a typical Phil Daru day?
okay, well, it really just depends if I'm going and coaching down at an American top team. If that happens, then I'm there from like 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 9 p.m.
Oh wow.
coaching every hour on the hour. But I wake up around like 5:30 a.m. and then from there I'll get some learning in. I'll read up on some studies and things like that. Then I'll wake my son up, get him ready for school, take him off to school, and then I'm off to do my thing. So usually that's the day right there. Is just coaching nonstop and studying up on what I need to.
Gotcha.
Do you coach every day, or is it kind of just a set schedule?
Primarily every day. I mean, today is an off day for me as far as from on the floor coaching, but I have to do some programming and I have to go over some other studies that I've been really researching on. But other than that, man, I'm always constantly doing something in
Mhm.
this avenue of what I do. You know what I mean?
So I'm a little curious, actually, the research that you do. Like, what kind of research are you doing, and what kind of guides that research? What are you looking for? What are you studying?
Well, right now, I'm just really more intrigued about how I can utilize velocity-based profiling with different means of ballistic training based upon transferability of the sport. So I'm really trying to figure out what's the best way, what's the most optimal way to go about doing it from a testing perspective. So I'm researching and trying to get through some details when it comes down to how I'm going to measure these markers out based upon if I'm going to use a transducer, if I'm going to use some type of jump mat device or some type of force plate that can measure out these particular means of understanding the athlete. So that's a major thing for me right now, is just because of the fact that like we need to find out whether or not what we're doing is working. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So either way, I'm trying to utilize my experiences and what has worked, what worked in the past. But since the sport is fairly new, when you're talking about mixed martial arts and even grappling in general, we need to develop a solid baseline of an approach when it comes down to testing and then retesting to see what we're actually doing is going to be efficient. The great thing about it is that I do coach other coaches too as well, and they've been utilizing my methods of training, and they've been seeing results with it too. So it's not just my athletes; it's my coaches that I work with. Their athletes are also getting good results with the things that we've been doing. So that's a good thing.
That's cool, man. You used some words that I'm not familiar with. So going back a little bit, you were talking about some different stuff. What exactly is that you were trying to develop and you're trying to research? You were talking.
Well,
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
velocity-based profile is just basically a measurement of to see exactly how fast or how strong an individual is.
Okay.
And what you want to see is the imbalance there. So if an athlete is faster than they are strong, then we have to obviously program that in accordingly, and vice versa. So
Mm.
primarily what I'm looking for is basically from a force velocity standpoint is where are they deficient in? Are they faster than they need to be? Or, do we need to increase their overall velocity when it comes down to the sport itself? When it comes down to like grappling sports, primarily, for the most part, we're looking to see isometric strength increases and overall the ability to have strength endurance in close quarters, especially for gi practitioners.
Sure.
But like no gi, there's a lot of like explosive movements there. Takedowns are more efficient there. There's a lot more transitions and scrambles. So for that, yeah, we're looking at the ability to reproduce high amounts of energy, explosiveness, power. And then also from a gi perspective, from looking at that, like Jazari Matuda, I've been working with her for a long time. Working and trying to get her grip strength and her isometric strength is important. She's already quite fast when you're talking about from a force velocity standpoint. So now what the goal would be for her, let's say for instance, would be to build up her maximal strength so that she can increase those abilities on the mats.
I got you. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out ways to measure it so that this way, if you're putting someone through a program, you can accurately say, well, hey, we wanted to make you stronger or we wanted to make you faster, and now we actually did that. We have a measurable way of saying that yes, we did that, or no, we did not.
Exactly, exactly, and it's always good to have metrics,
Yeah.
and have some data there. I'm not the biggest fan of like calculating as much data as possible. I think you get lost in the minutia of it.
Sure.
And it takes away from the coaching ability. So I try to utilize it as much as I possibly can. I'm not a sports scientist. I'm a coach. So at the end of the day, I'm going to use these sports science means to help my coaching ability, but also help the progression of my athletes. But I can utilize these techniques and get these things in order so that when the time comes to show the athlete the things that we're doing is working based on the numbers, that's very good for me because, again, that helps with buy-in, that helps with, adherence to the program itself.
Yeah. And I think it probably helps because you've trained before, obviously, and you're in it. You're not just a guy who's like talking about theoretical stuff. You've actually done it, and so you have the unique perspective of being able to be a coach. You're doing it, you've done it, and then you can take your own intuition and sort of see how that actually measures out. Like, why did this work for everyone? Why did I think this worked? And now you can actually maybe see some sort of tangible way of saying, yeah, this is why it worked, and here's what it did.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the best thing to have right there is tangible evidence. Like you're talking about, perfect. In all actuality, like I said, the sport is very new. And when you're talking about combat sports in general, there's so many different factors going on. And for just a standard approach, like sport coaches, they really just want to see the athlete do well inside the sport. So for me, I need to see what's going to have the highest correlation over to the sport to help them in their game. So with that, I need to make sure that I'm giving them a baseline perspective of programming, whether it be, getting them stronger, getting them faster, getting them more explosive. And then from there, what's going to have the biggest transfer over to the mats or to the cage. And that's our biggest thing right now. Like, honestly, it drives me crazy sometimes because I want to get it down pat, like I want to pull my hair out sometimes, but at the end of the day, I know that we're still very new in our approach, but we want to make sure that we're not going too far away from, the standard practice of just getting them stronger, getting them faster, getting them more explosive, and then fixing correctives or correcting imbalances and fixing those deficiencies that they may have from a dysfunction standpoint.
What are you looking for, when you see an athlete for the first time? What's kind of a standard assessment for you? What are you looking for? I mean, for example, like you look at football, you've got, 40-yard dash, you bench press, they'll do 225 reps. What are some like standards that you think are good to look at to get a baseline idea of an athlete?
Yeah, it really depends on the sport too. For the most part, I work with a lot of combat sport athletes now. So, since I've been in the sport, I can see now what we need to really focus on is mobility and movement quality, in-range control.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, you can be flexible. You can get into a range if you're passively stretching it, but you also have to have the control in those end ranges to do work, right? So if I'm getting stuck or if I'm stacked in guard or whatever the case, I need to have the strength to get out of that position, at least not be stuck in that position so that I can improve on where I'm at. So with that being said, I'm looking at mobility. I'm looking at movement control. I'll do that with some functional range conditioning assessments where I'm actually working through the controlled articular rotations and seeing where they're deficient in their movement pattern of each joint capsule up the kinetic chain. And then from there, I can kind of correlate, all right, this person may be slightly kyphotic or have an anterior pelvic tilt, or, they have less external rotation. And usually you see common occurrences, especially with combat sport athletes. Again, kyphotic posture is one that's very prevalent. Tight shoulders, tight anterior shoulders, tight pecs, things like that. And then what happens there is a trickle down effect, right? You have less ability to contract the posterior chain efficiently. So glute contraction, external rotation, things like that become hindered because they really don't get in those positions and they don't explore those ranges.
Yes.
And then they just get weaker. So if I'm like, let's say, for instance, I have a guy that I know that primarily plays off his back, I'm going to look for having better hip dexterity to help with guard retention.
Right.
And the only way I can do that is to actually see how his hips move and if they can move controllably in space, but also can they be strong in end ranges? Because, again, if he's trying to maintain guard, he needs to be strong in any type of position, whether it be, working in any guard position. So again, that's very important. Then after that, obviously, we're going to see power production. We want to see absolute strength, and that's where that force, the force velocity profile comes into play. You can do things like reactive strength index, where we're actually measuring out and seeing how fast ground reaction time is. And that's more important for my MMA guys because I want to see how fast they can redirect force. And that's going to tell me, all right, do they have more ability to have that stretch reflex, that stretch shortening cycle to where it's super fast and they can get in and out of the pocket more efficiently. And that's going to tell me movement quality too as well, and speed and quickness. Power production is obviously self-explanatory. We want to see punching power through the transverse plane, kicking power through the transverse plane. So we'll do like a med ball throw, and we'll do a landmine throw with a barbell attached. And then from there, like we'll do a standard box jump just to see where their overall explosiveness is in their lower body. Triple extension is key for me. Just from a grappling standpoint, you would look at triple extension as a means of having the ability to take down your opponent or stop a takedown, right? So if they have great triple extension, if they have good, solid strength in the posterior chain, especially in the hips, that's going to be very important for us. So that's another thing. And then your standard conditioning test, we want to run a VO2 max test just for a baseline assessment of aerobic capacity. And then from there, I can kind of base the heart rates through that. And then I'll also run a maximal aerobic speed test. And I'll do that, actually doing that through a beep test, which is just a basic field-based test that you can do in a group setting, which is very good because I have a lot of guys sometimes and they like to compete and it works out well. I don't need a lab to do it. Now, if I do have the ability to take them to a laboratory, I'm definitely going to do it because it's going to help me get that lactate threshold marked down, and then I can also see their VO2 max too as well. And it's obviously the most precise way of doing the test itself. But those are our basic testing, and then from there, I'm also watching them spar. I'm also watching them roll. I want to see how well they move in there. I want to see how strong they are. I want to see their conditioning when the time really counts in live training, and that's really more of a test parameter from a specificity standpoint. And the great thing about it is that I'm there at ATT, so I can watch the training and I can see, and I can also talk to the coaches and see what exactly do we need to do from a sport specific standpoint to help them out, just from a general base of athletic ability.
Yeah. I've got a few, if you can clarify a couple things. So some people don't know, they don't have quite a medical background or like athletic background like you do. I've taken an FRC course, so it's awesome. I had Dr. Spina, kind of taking us through it, cussing at us like for 2 days straight, which is pretty fun. He's a good dude, man. He's super knowledgeable, and but yeah, the merit in like in range strengthening and isometric holds and preventing injuries, having that capacity for movement. So I've been working that as a physical therapist. I've kind of had some basic knowledge of it in school, and I've used it some, but not to the capacity now that like I understand it better and the details behind it. So it's really important, like I said, for jiu-jitsu guys to maybe get in these compressed positions to be able to either explode or control your opponent or control your limbs where they are in space. The other thing, so describe kind of, you said the med ball throw. What's your I'll give you a couple things so you can answer them. So med ball throw, how do you measure that? Are you
That's
looking
very
at
easy. Yeah.
just distance?
What's that?
Just distance they throw, or what are you looking for?
Just the distance.
Okay.
So it's a basic tape measure.
Okay.
And they'll throw usually for males, it's like maybe a 3 to 4 kilo ball.
Got it.
And then for females, it'd be like a 1 to 2 kilo.
Got it.
And we're just measuring distance. I usually do the test 9 weeks out from the fights or from competition, and then we'll do it again about 4 weeks out, 5 to 4 weeks out, depending on the schedule and everything.
They're doing like a chest press type movement, right? Like
it'd actually be a rotational throw.
Oh, rotation. Okay.
So for instance,
got it. Yeah.
I'll do two actually. I'll do for my grapplers. I'll have them sit basically facing away from the wall where their back is against the wall.
Uh-huh.
So they're sitting with their feet straight out, and they only can use their arms and their shoulders and their chest, obviously, right? They can't lunge forward. They can't leave their back off the wall because I want to simulate basically being able to either push out of a position, whether that be in mount or something like that. I want to have that ability and that control. Not to say that you should do this, especially you guys probably know that. But again, I still want them to have that strength there and that power outputs. I'm just trying to see that. And then from the combat sport, let's say, for instance, if it's a striking sport, boxing, kickboxing, MMA. It's going to be more of a rotational throw. And now I'm just trying to measure out transverse abdominal strength and power output. And we'll do that just a basic. Basically, they're standing there. They'll throw the ball just like they're throwing their backhand. And if they're orthodox, they'll start there, and then they'll go to the left side or vice versa.
And then, so triple extension, for people who don't know, for looking at the longer extremity, describe that, exactly what that means.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, that's basically extension of the ankles, knees, and hips. Yep. And we want to see that through either a vertical jump or a box jump, especially if the athletes they lack the ability to jump. I don't like to do any type of like broad jump or any maximal output jumps where it's just going vertical and down, because they lack the ability to land.
Yeah, the mechanics.
So, yeah, the mechanics are terrible. And a lot of the fighters, and it's funny because the people interview me and they're like, "What's it like, training these high level athletes?" And I'm like, man, I kind of got to hold my tongue a little bit. Because are we talking about like athletes, or are we talking about fighters? Because there's two different, the styles there. And don't get me wrong, some fighters are true athletes. Like there's some out there I can name a few. Like Edson Barbosa is a true athlete, you know what I mean? But he's also a phenomenal fighter. But you got other guys that are like, you don't even know how they actually are able to step into the cage and walk.
I want to know a name. I know you won't tell us, but I'm curious. All these people at ATT are like, you watch them fight, and a lot of them are in the UFC, and you're like, you think they're all just incredible, and they have to be. They have to be incredible at fighting. I mean, you train a lot of different. You train heavyweights to like. I think you have Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who's she a flyweight? I mean, so you got 125 or strawweight, 115.
Yeah, she's fought in both. So.
Yeah, so from 115 to like 260. I mean, like you got to think the mechanics, the mobility, it's male versus female, even. I mean, just the training, it's probably two different training. Like just the training looks totally different, I'm sure, for those people.
It's tough, man, because then you'll have the same people in one group. So you'll have like 6 to 8 individuals all fighting at different times, all with different backgrounds, all with different athletic abilities, weight changes and things like that. So, yeah, my system has to remain the same in order for me to run it smoothly. But, again, everything is, catered and subjective towards the individual. Based upon what they need at that particular time.
Okay. VO2 max test, are you just doing like an Airdyne? Are you doing anything specific? How are you checking that? And what are your assessment tools that you like to use?
So I do a maximal aerobic power test on an assault bike, which has been really beneficial for us because I base my protocols off of that. We have an assault bike in the gym, so basically I'll get their maximal aerobic power, and it's basically measured in watts. So what I do is we'll do a 2-minute ramp up test, and we'll start at 160 watts the males will start at 160, the females will start at 120, and they'll increase their wattage by about 50 to 60 watts every 2 minutes until they can no longer sustain that amount of output. And then from there, that'll end up being an indicator of their maximal aerobic power output. And that's going to give us a slight indication of their VO2 max too as well, as long as I'm also taking into account their heart rate. And again, I'm trying to measure their heart rate as much as possible. Not everyone can get a heart rate monitor, but that would be ideal, right? And then from there, I'll put together protocols based off of their MAP. And whether it be aerobic power, aerobic capacity, alactic capacity, these all go into place, just energy system training. And it really is just depending upon where they're at in their camp. But as far as the VO2 max test, I usually just run a standard beep test. And again, like I said, they just run for 20 meters at a time. They listen to the beep. The only problem that I'm running into, and this is just from experience, is that a lot of the guys don't or can't run efficiently. So efficiency of movement becomes the issue again, right? Mm-hmm. If they can run and they run a lot, like Dustin Poirier, Edson Barbosa, these guys also do a lot of running just in general. So for them, it's a lot easier for them to get. But if you got heavyweights, I'm obviously not going to run them on a beat. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that MAP test comes in handy with the assault bike, especially if I don't have a whole lot of time to run them into a lab and things like that. But I can measure out, LT1, LT2, just based off of the MAP. And then I can basically put together some type of calculations to measure out, okay, what's going to be the most important for them to work off of, whether it be, in zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and maybe in the red zone, just depending upon where they're at and what they need, from a conditioning standpoint.
Interesting.
Cool. Man, I'm curious because obviously you're this super knowledgeable coach. You're working with fighters and stuff like that. And we kind of just screw up our podcast by always doing it this way where we just start talking. But how did you get started in like martial arts, mixed martial arts, fighting, athletics, any of that stuff? How did you get started in sort of this path that's led you here?
Yeah, well, I started doing martial arts when I was a kid. I was like 4 years old. I did Kempo karate, and I was like in the gi doing my thing.
Yeah.
So I started doing that for a little bit, and my entire family was into martial arts, and I was a big Bruce Lee fan, obviously, growing up. Then I kind of transitioned into playing more like sport teams, more team sport activities like football, basketball, baseball, and I really took a liking to football. So I started doing that. I played that all the way up into college, got my degree there, playing football. People say, what did I study in college? And I was like, basically, I studied football. I mean, really, like the side hustle was getting to learn more about exercise science.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and then after that, I was kind of like, man, I need to compete. I need to do something. And I was actually boxing. I was doing amateur boxing on the off season, and I made an alias name because the NCAA wouldn't allow us to do that.
Really?
So like, I think my name was like Matt Jansen or some crazy stuff like that, or I don't know, something like that. And I was like fighting on the weekends, and we were doing these tournaments, and I was doing really well. I had a good base of striking ability just from years of doing that, and then also just watching like Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and all those guys. And so I went in there and started boxing. I was like, man, I really like boxing. So after football, I was trying to find a gym and I'm originally from South Florida, Fort Lauderdale area. And my parents actually moved up to Port St. Lucie. Now, Port St. Lucie is like population. At this point, it was like there was nobody there. Let's just put it like that. There was nothing around. So I was like, damn, I need to do something. And I was doing personal training on the side. So I looked up the gym, and the first gym that I found was Buddy McGurk's gym up in Vero Beach, which is about 45 minutes away. So I was like, man, I know me. I'm going to want to train twice a day, almost 3 times a day. And it's like, that's kind of a far drive for me to do that. And I didn't have any money at that point. So it was a little bit difficult. But then I found that there was an American Top Team affiliate school up in Port St. Lucie. And that affiliate school was owned by Dean Thomas. And Dean Thomas, you guys know who Dean is.
Oh, yeah.
Dean was my first coach. So
really?
I literally ran up on him when he was opening up the door and was like, hey, man, I want to fight. And he's like, all right, kid, whatever. So I was like, he's like, another kid want to do something, want to fight or whatever. And I was really rough around the edges, like I grew up in a bad neighborhood down south, and there was a lot like this hood white boy trying to tell me he wants to fight,
Yeah.
So he's like, come in, try a class. And I did the class. And then I remember I didn't want to do jiu-jitsu. I was like, I really don't feel like rolling around with dudes. Like I'm good. Like, but at the end, then I started really realizing like, this is actually a true art. Like this is actually fun, and it's almost like a chess match. So I started really getting into it. And then I took my first amateur fight, did very well my first year as an amateur. And then it only took I did 4 amateur fights, and I did well in all of them. So Dean was like, all right, let's go pro. And my first pro fight was against a guy named Kurt Hollabaugh, who was like a pretty well-known guy in Louisiana. Yeah. And it was funny because Dustin actually cross-trained with him. So it was like kind of goes full circle here with Dustin Poirier.
What year is this? Your first pro fight, what year is this?
2010, 2011.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was back then, and the guy actually was the kid that I fought. I was the main event there too as well. This was in, I want to say, I forgot where it was. It was in Louisiana though. But main event, the guy's really good. He's 12-0 as an amateur. He fought in the UFC a couple times.
Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah. And but I mean, it was really good. I mean, like I went out there, we were striking pretty hard, and I didn't know that he was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu at the time. And me, again, still very green in jiu-jitsu, like really green. I just basically used to hold people down and try to just, catch wrestle as much as I possibly could. So needless to say, with my first pro fight, ended up like throwing the overhand left and taking him down in the middle of the cage. And I remember taking him down and I'm like, oh shit, like I'm not feeling too good. 'Cause he kept me in the top of my head and I'm like, wait a minute. Oh yeah, we can do this now. This hurts. This doesn't feel good. So I was like this, boom, and put my hands out like this. And he just swung over and caught the armbar. And I had to tap. I didn't tap. I just screamed out the F word, and they were like, "Oh, that's it." That was my thing there. And then after that, got it together a little bit there. But the problem there also was that I was also building my business too as a coach. And I opened up my own facility at 22 years old. So I'm like a year into my pro career, and there was a lot of outside things going on. My parents were getting my mom had lupus, my dad was in a wheelchair, so there was a lot of things that I had to take care of. So I was really focused on building the business and really wasn't training a whole lot, and focus wasn't there. And that's when you end up, when focus is not in the right direction, things may happen. It was either I was going to let my business go to hell, or I was going to let my professional career kind of go down the drains. And actually, I started to pick it up and find a way to coordinate it and schedule it and have some help. I grew my gym business from 800 square foot facility with like 12 people to up to 11,000 square feet in 6 months. And then we had over 300 members, had a full cage in there. There was a lot of things in there that I'm proud of from a business standpoint. But again, there's a lot of things that I could have did from my professional career to enhance my abilities, and it didn't really go hand in hand when you have a business like that 100% in. So after that, I'm probably about 25. I'm making my way back. I got some help now, so I'm doing well. Just won my last fight, and then I'm going into my next fight. And remember now, I played football since I was 8 years old, so accumulation of head trauma has been prevalent. So like for me, I know I've had about at least 8 concussions that I can remember, and bad ones too, not knowing where I was and having headaches for days and things like that, nausea, everything else. I was probably 2 weeks out from my last fight, and I was like 26 years old at this point. And one of my training partners, we're just drilling. It was a freak accident. And he came up and basically did like a spinning back kick. And we weren't sparring hard. It was just a drill session. And he came down hard, like whipped it down across the back of my head. And it rocked me. And I was kind of out on my feet. I knew I was concussed a little bit there. But the problem was I didn't recover as well as I usually do. And it took about 4 days for me to be like, all right, I gotta call out of this fight, which I didn't want to because the fight was actually a really good fight for me. Stylistically, I was gonna do really well, but I went to the neurologist and he checked me out and he was like, "Man, listen, you're accumulating those beta amyloid plaques that are going to cause issues down the line if you don't stop getting repeated head trauma." And basically, at the end of the day, he was like, "If you don't stop by the time you're 50, you're probably gonna develop Alzheimer's." And I was like, "Well, that sucks."
Yeah.
So at this point, my son was just born. The business was going really well. I was trying to go back to get my grad degree. And I remember going to school now and being like, man, I don't even remember what they just said. And usually I have a great memory. But now it was like I was foggy. Like memory is, I have to read over and over again now, different subjects. So it's very frustrating when like it was easy to pick up things before and now it takes a little bit longer. And I don't know if old age becomes an issue too as well. I mean, but for me, I was like, there's something here. So now I'm getting it all together. I'm making sure that I'm taking my omega-3s, I'm doing collagen, I'm doing things that are going to help brain functionality in a way from a supplementation standpoint. And then also just making sure that I'm constantly reading and constantly not stressing my mind, but,
giving it a workout.
Yeah. Like making it work, and even if that has to do with like games, chess games and, things like that, that's important for me because at the end of the day, I don't want to lose what I have right now, and I want to keep progressing. So but that's been it. And I decided to, I called Dean actually, and I was like, man, what do you think? And he was like, man, if it was like your knee or, your back or something like that or anything, but it's your brain, you can't really mess with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it took me a while still. And I was, because I put a lot of time and effort into this thing. And, finally decided to call it quits and just basically retire from it. And for a minute, for about a year, I was just doing powerlifting and I was doing strongman. I even did some bodybuilding. I just wanted to get away from the entire sport, didn't want to have anything to do with it. And then finally I was like, man, I need to be back in it. So I called Dean up and I go, man, you got anybody down there? Because this is when he actually transitioned and he sold his gym up in Port St. Lucie and now was one of the head coaches down at Coconut Creek. So it all comes around full circle. And I called him up. I go, man, do you have anybody that you want me to work with down there? Because I know you're down there full time. I don't have really much to do now because I'm just coaching. And he was like, you actually may be in luck because the old S&C coach is actually leaving. Can you get your resume together? So I got it together, ran down there, 90-minute drive down there, and then my first day, I remember I coached Dustin Poirier, Tisha Torres, King Mola Wall, and Hector Lombard. That was my group that I had to train. So it was cool. Yeah. But the great thing about it also, though, is that I've been down there a bunch of times. I trained down there a bunch of times, but they didn't know me as a coach. They knew me as the fighter. So now I had to transition that way into, being more of the authoritative type instead of being a buddy type, But that's where I've been for the past 4 years now.
So, man, how long did it take? Because I'm curious about this because I feel like, we all go through these, periodically through our lives, we go through basically an ego death, right? Like, and you were this, hard charging football player, fighter, strong dude, all these different things, these warrior aspects, right? And then all of a sudden you've got to stop doing that. How long did it take you to transition? Like, I remember when I stopped fighting, like, it took me a little while to, like, get it out of my system where, because, I'd go to fights and I'd already committed to not fighting, but then I'd go to a fight and coach my guy. I'm like, man, I got the itch. I kind of want to we want to do it again, But now I can go to the fights and I can coach. I have no desire to be there. I'm there to coach, and I understand that. But how long did it take you to go from that point where I'm not fighting because of this brain thing. You still want to, but you're not going to the point where you're like, all right, I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to be in this, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think, the great thing about the transition was that I always had like a coach's mentality, though. So I've always been, captain of my team. I was always like kind of bringing everybody together, especially even when we were fighting. Now, with that being said, yes, like I said, I had to take a full year off from even being around the sport, not even watching any type of fighting. Like, didn't go to any competitions until, that year and a half. And I was like, all right, man, I need to start. I think I was watching, I don't know what UFC I was watching, but I was like, man, I really need to be a part of the sport. Like, this sport I fell in love with, and it grew into me. And now like I'm doing a lot more jiu-jitsu at this point. I'm still staying active with that. I wanted to compete. I ended up tearing my ACL. We can talk about that too as well.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just, I still want to, I always was like, what, at some point in time, I cannot leave this to rest, and I still have more to help out in this industry and more to prove in myself, and honestly now, and you probably see it too as a coach, watching my guys and girls win their fights was actually more gratifying to see that than me actually winning, because at the end of the day, when I win a fight, I was like, yeah, I won it, but there's other things that you think about, right? If you're a competitor, you're like, man, I messed up on this thing, or I should have did this. Whereas that, like, when you have an athlete that does everything perfectly and rises to the occasion at the highest level in the elite, the elite of the elite, it's something remarkable to see, firsthand. And watching Joanna and watching, Dustin and these guys do their thing and take care of business on that grand scale, it's definitely a lot more gratifying, in my opinion, than actually me winning a fight. And that's because I think that I always developed that coach's mentality.
Yeah, I think you got that. Whatever it is that like makes a good coach, right? Who like whether it's a gene or just some sort of upbringing experience, whatever it is. Because there's some guys that don't get off on that. That don't have that same sort of excitement when someone does something. But I agree with you completely because that's me. Like whenever you see one of your students do something and you know that you had like showed them something or you took them, helped them out with that little thing that they were having trouble with, and you see them overcome it or you see them execute it. There's no better feeling than that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it comes down to like, as fighters, you're naturally selfish, right? As competitors, you're naturally selfish. But as coaches, you have to be selfless, like 100%, because it is all about the athletes, it is about the students, and it's all about their professional growth and how they get going into their goals. So for that, I have to take a step back and be like, yo, man, it's really not about you. It's about the athletes. It's about them being successful. And when they're successful, you'll ultimately be successful as well.
Yeah, I think that, me being a student, being a jiu-jitsu Chewy student, and I've been with him for probably 10 years now at least, you have to have a coach. I think the distinguishing feature, you have to be a good coach, but a lot of coaches are good, but some just don't care. Like I think having that component where you really care about, what you're doing. So you do the research, you study, you test, retest, you do that stuff, but you care if they win or lose, you care how they perform. And also I think you have a really unique perspective because you know what the outcome can be. In mixed martial arts, you've been hit in the head, you've had some issues with memory and your mind, and you want to see that your athletes don't go through that. And I think that's a big thing. I think that maybe makes you unique is you kind of know you've been there and you've kind of done it.
Yeah, that was one thing that kind of separated me from a lot of the guys starting out now with the strength and conditioning world. I can relate to the guys because I know how it feels to cut weight. I know how it feels to go through a camp. I know how it feels to have outside influences and things you got to worry about other than just training, inside of a camp. So that's a reason for me of understanding the athlete to that degree that helps me with buy-in and overall communication.
Right.
And trust in the process of what I'm doing is trying to make sure that they are getting the most out of this situation of what we're doing. And they know that they can come to me and ask me questions about different things, not just about strength and conditioning, but other things that surround the fight game. And that's a big thing for me. I think that that's one thing that separated myself again, like from the rest of the guys that are coming in. Now we have a lot of good guys in the strength and conditioning world right now that are getting into MMA and getting into combat sports, and that never probably even never fought a day in their life. But they are also stepping foot on a mat now, and they're getting their belt rank up and things like that. And that's good. And I like that. Not to say that you have to fight or go through, that type of deal, but you need to train the sport to really understand what goes into it.
Right.
Not just like a cardio kickboxing class, like really take a jiu-jitsu class, go and do some kickboxing, like spar, go into a boxing gym and spar. Trust me. It's a different atmosphere. It's a different feeling. Mm-hmm. And doing that day in and day out and understanding that is going to help you be a better coach and help you relay things over to your athletes a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, I do want to ask you, though, since you've had some of these different experiences, what's been a process for you that maybe you saw a fighter and you expect them to reach these little, you probably have little goals in training camp you got to be able, to achieve. When have you had an opportunity, or when have you decided that maybe you shouldn't let somebody fight? Talk about that process. You see somebody and they're just not getting to these points. Like, what is that process for you, and how do you go about that, and how do you share that with an athlete?
Yeah, it's very tough. And it really depends on the individual too as well. I have a lot of veterans that are almost at their tailor end of their career. I had this issue with King Mo. I think it was our second camp together, and he fought Phil Davis. And I could talk about this now because he's retired, and I'm happy for him. He's a coach now with us. But I didn't even want him to fight after that Phil Davis fight, because I just seen the deterioration, just not from just from head trauma, but like also just his body in general wasn't taking to any of the training. Mm-hmm. Like there would be negative effects to everything we did. he had borderline Graves' disease when you're talking about, thyroid, hypothyroidism
thyroid.
and things like that. He couldn't even gain any weight. That's why he fought at that weight class. But the guy's a warrior. Like, he's a true warrior. He would go in and he would train his ass off. He would help other people train, Then he would, stay longer to try to do some type of strength and conditioning. I was like, man, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, you're 198 pounds and you're skinny as a rail right now, and you're trying to fight at heavyweight, and you're not moving efficiently. Like, you have 7 ACL injuries, like 7. I think he had like 5 or 6 surgeries. He's had MRSA inside the ACL or inside the knee where the ACL injury occurred.
Man.
On top of that, he has a hip resurfacing, but he could barely move his body. Like, he could barely lift up his legs. Then he has, bone spurs and other bursitis everywhere. Like, it's crazy. So basically, you're sitting there and you're watching a guy that you enjoy being around, and you actually look up to, going through these issues. And I wanted to tell him, I was like, man, I really think we could do something different. Like, you can make something happen. Man, you're a star. You know what I'm saying? It's not like he's a nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And what? At the end of the day, he wanted to fight. He wanted to still prove his worth, and he liked fighting. It wasn't like it was something that he just did on the side or that he was good at and just fell into it. He loves to fight. So for that, I can't deter a grown man at that, from doing what he wants to do and loves to do. I can give him my advice. I can tell him heart to heart as a friend, this isn't what I would want for you and what I think is best for you, but you have to make your own decisions because you are a grown man. And I'm going to go ahead and if that's the decision you make, yes, I will support you in that decision. I just don't agree with it. Now, there's other issues where you have things like weight cut issues and like injuries and things like that, where it is actually going to be detrimental to the athlete, especially if they're a young athlete. I will pull them back and they have no say-so in it, right? If the physical therapist, and we work with a great physical therapist, Christiana Marin, if I bring them over to her and she's like, it's a no-go, then it's a no-go. If you're under if you're not at that level, if you're not fighting for a world title and you're about to make $1 million fighting Conor McGregor or something like that, then you're going to be held back, because I know that it's going to take that one shot to cause a significant amount of injury that's going to hinder your entire career after that. So what we want to do is, I just did it recently with one of my girls that just fought. She wanted to fight again on a boxing card because she was going to make good money, but she just got off a hard-fought loss. She took some damage, and she wants to go back and fight in a boxing match with a girl that's heavier than her in 3 weeks. I said, no, probably not the best idea, right?
Yeah.
But she's also 23 years old. She's got a whole career ahead of her.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a couple of, I think it was like a few $1,000, it's not worth it. You know what I mean? So those are the issues that we see, and it's subjective and at that point in time. But yeah, I got both sides, and it really just depends on the individual and the circumstances.
Mm. So, man, earlier you kind of made a joke, or you said something, and it kind of made me think about something. You were saying that you came up to Dean Thomas, you go in there, and you're like immediately, hey, man, I want to fight. So, like, every gym, every coach, every instructor I've ever spoken to gets those people that come to the gym. Hey, man, I'm ready to fight. Put me in there, whatever, that kind of stuff. Like, and obviously it's ATT, so maybe it's a little bit different. But, like, do you guys just get people walking in there? They're like, man, I'm ready to go. Put me in there, whatever. Or do they have to go through some sort of vetting process where you're like, look, man, before we even see you, man, you've got to do this, this, and this. Like, how does that work? So some guy that comes in there, whether he's going to stick around for, years to come, or if he's going to quit after like 3 months, if he comes in there and says, man, I want to fight. Like, what do you guys make them do?
Yeah. Well, for me, like when I went up to Dean, I was like, I want to fight, and I told him I want to train though. Like I want to train, I want to get good at this thing. So he kind of was like, oh, okay.
Well, that's a different response. Sometimes you just get guys that say, I want to fight, man.
Sign
but they
the
say
waiver,
nothing about
baby.
the training.
Sign the waiver.
Yeah. No, We don't really get that a whole lot at ATT because again, like with the main headquarters, like you're not even allowed to step foot on the mats unless you're in like a higher promotion or you are a very high level prospect.
Okay.
You'll have some homegrown amateurs that are there that have been there since they were kids that come up into the ranks, and there's a few there that are there that still are making their way up. But you have to remember, at American Top Team, we have over 150 fighters, and all of these guys and girls are elite, and they're all fighting in major promotions. So we do get guys, though, that think they have some clout, and they think that they're good, and they come from different areas of the world, and they come in, and they get kind of, dealt a bad hand. And, guys like, like back when Hector Lombard was there, like he'd put you in your place,
Yeah.
It was a crazy thing to watch those guys go at it. And they wouldn't last long, and you would see just that they weren't cut out for weren't cut out for the sport, or they just weren't cut out for that level of competition inside the training, whereas like where we have, again, it's iron sharpens iron. I know it's cliche to say, but it's true, but I know in Dean School, we had a lot of guys that would come in and they would be like, yeah, I'm ready to make it to the UFC, and with their chest pumped up, and they would be like the bodybuilder type guys, that come in. And we just put them through just a basic gauntlet of, whether it be, getting them in the sparring and watching them just do rounds on rounds. And it would be against our young kids. And they would just, see how they responded to that type of pressure, and to, actually watching themselves get degraded because they were getting their ass whooped by 16-year-old kids. And these guys were like, 27, 28-year-old grown men that work out at LA Fitness, and they thought they were, beefed up and ready to go. But truly, they weren't ready for what was about to occur to them or about to happen to them. And it occurred to them that this wasn't the sport for them.
Yeah, man, I used to do the same thing. I had a kid. He's a black belt now, obviously, and he's an adult. But when he was a kid, man, he was a freak. He was like purple belt, and he was submitting black belts and stuff. But he was a beanpole. He's like 6 foot tall, 120 pounds, 130. And whenever we would get these big guys, like you're talking about, we would get them in there, and they would want to like puff up. We had a guy who came in. He was a military guy, just got out of the military. He was big, man, probably about 250. Comes in there. He said, "Man, I'm ready to fight tomorrow, whatever." I said, "Oh, okay, wait a minute. Just come here real quick. Roll with that kid over there. If you don't get submitted, we'll talk, right?" And I give Chad, I would wink at him when I wanted him to like put the business on him. I just kind of wink at him, and he put that guy in a triangle. And this guy said he knew how to roll and stuff, like he knew to tap. So he gets in there, and he all of a sudden starts snoring. I had to wake him up. I was like, "Hey, man," like he's like, "What happened?" I was like, "You got put to sleep by a 14-year-old kid, man." Like, and again, like you're saying, you're not even looking at him to do well. You're just like, can you submit to the process? Can you just like lay whoever you are outside? Can you just leave that person out there and come in here and start fresh and then begin anew? And that's the biggest thing.
I think if some people need to get humbled like that, and if they come back, well, that shows true character.
Yes.
And we are looking for that. Like, we do want to see that, because those guys that do have that athletic ability and are strong, they do have the potential to be really good if they can follow direction and if they can be, consistent. And then you got the guys that just want to go in there and then they get their ego, drawn down, and now they never come back. And we get that a ton of times. But yeah, there's a give and take on that one. I think I was more along the lines of like, listen, I know I'm athletic. I know there's some things that I can't do, but I want to improve on it. And that's why I'm here. You know what I mean? And nowadays, like I got back into the gi probably 2 years ago. And it's completely different. Chewy, it's like from no gi MMA to gi, and then just the overall thought process going around just training that, you have to be more methodical in your approach, and you have to think 3 steps ahead, and no gi is the same, but it's just on another level with the gi because it's just more detailed, I guess, in that way. And I mean, you can tell me I'm wrong if I'm not.
No, I agree. I think especially if you're talking about fighting, like if you're talking about like no-gi, like MMA, then you're talking about with a punch thrown. The games it simplifies so much because you can't do all that crazy stuff because you can get hit. So it becomes a very simplistic game, and there's a lot of explosion and a lot of everything's urgent. Everything has to be done with urgency. Whereas when you're grappling, whether it be gi or no-gi, if it's pure grappling, the intricacy grows. And then, like you said, man, especially with the gi where there's all these other handles, it becomes much more intricate. And there's a lot more stuff to worry about, and there's a lot more opportunities on the table.
Yeah, I mean, the game changes a little bit for me. Like right now, I really had to learn how to work inverted and X guard and De La Hiva. And
Sure.
they're not really doing that in MMA. Like,
No.
so, especially me being a striker, like I'm just like, all right, hip escape, get up, or something, or sweep, and then try to just maintain staying heavy and just ground and pound. My top game is good from that perspective, but now working on bottom and making sure that I'm moving more efficiently in those particular ranges is definitely, it's more of a process now, and I'm taking to that process. Obviously, I had a little bit of an issue, but I'm working towards getting back on the mats as close as I can.
Yeah. So what happened with your knee?
So I was actually rolling, and it was one of my buddies is a brown belt, really solid brown belt. It's probably going to be a black belt in the next couple of months. But I stood up to pass, and he wrapped the De La Hiva, and then he did like the modified De La Hiva where he grabbed my ankle, and my foot was in external torque. So I was externally rotated here, and then I just went to push down and rotate out. Opposing torque forces ended up. I felt the pop. I heard the pop, and I was like, "Oh man!" And I started doing like rotations and like self-assessing, doing a Latchman test. Like I'm like, "All right, I'm good." And then, I wasn't good.
Yeah.
So, but the great thing, if you guys watch any like my Instagram and I have a YouTube channel, I'm going through that process. I'm still able to do a lot of things. I'm strong enough, and that was the one thing that kind of saved everything else, was that my hamstrings were super strong, and I still have the stability there to do movement. Like right now, I'm still able to squat, I'm still able to deadlift, I'm still able to do most of the things I need to do. Obviously, in jiu-jitsu, I can't go live right now just because of I don't want to mess it up even more. But drilling, I'm still good there. I just can't rotate, and I can't produce lateral force.
How bad was the tear? Like, is it going to require surgery, or is this time off?
It's a full ACL tear.
Okay.
What are you going to have done? What kind of procedure?
And maybe you can tell me, but I was thinking more patella.
That's what, yeah. So, man, the research goes back and forth and back and forth. They say do a cadaver because it's faster recovery, it's stronger. And then say use your own tissue. I think a lot of wrestlers are maybe getting patellar tendon. And the reason why I think it's a stronger graft, that's what they think. Yeah. But it just depends on your sport. Like, here's the thing. If you're doing patellar tendon, then you're going to have a secondary injury. Like, you can't kneel for a while, and that's going to hurt for a while. You're weakening that tendon some. Yeah. So what they're doing, Chew, is they're taking a sliver out of your patellar tendon. Okay? And they're taking it out, and they're using it for your ACL. Okay. And over time, I mean, when you use your own tissue, they say it does better. But, man, you've heard people that have hamstring grafts do well, but then your hamstrings get weaker a little bit. And I don't know what – everybody's different, You being a big, strong dude with good hamstring strength and good hip strength, you can do a lot of this crazy stuff that people, can't do. But, again, that torque, you get in a position, you're going to get that shearing and get that, that mobility in that knee that's not supposed to be there. And then, you could tear some other stuff, meniscus, you could, lead to arthritis.
Because that's what I'm worried about right now, because I'm coaching on it full time. And now, I'm getting into, like, I'm not going to have surgery till April because of the fact that I have so much going on right now. I got Joanna's fight coming up. I got to go to Vegas. Then I got to go to the Ukraine to do a seminar. So I'm not going to have any time until that. So right now I'm doing basically pre-op, and I'm strengthening up all the surrounding tissue as much as possible. And I'm actually programming it out accordingly so that at that, 4 weeks out, once I had the surgery, at least it'll be a better transition to recovery.
100%. The stronger you are going in, the more function you have, the more range of motion, the more stability. I mean, as long as it's not like really translating a ton, you know what I mean? If you're doing everything pretty controlled and you don't feel like that knee's really moving around too much, I don't see any problem with it. I mean, a lot of people don't even get it fixed. I mean, honestly, I would for you, because are you in your 30s?
31, yeah.
Oh, you're young, man. Yeah, you definitely get that fixed. You want, if you're somebody that's like, upper 40s and you're like have a sedentary job and you're just going to be kind of doing your thing, you probably don't need it, But yeah, 31, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, I was saying that I want to still compete. I want to compete Yeah, I want to. I mean, at least I was gonna do Miami Open. I was gonna do Orlando Open. But
Yeah, you got to, like, you're a big researcher, man. Start researching a little more. I've heard patellar tendon is kind of the way to go, but again, some people do cadaver and they do really well. Some people do their, who knows, man?
Yeah,
Who knows?
I've been doing the research, and it's like with the cadaver, it's about a 35% increase in your body not taking to
the rejection,
the cadaver.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I don't want to end up like Dominic Cruz over here, and have another issue down the line. So for that, I'm like, okay, I know my tissue is healthy. We can work around it, and then I have a solid post-op, rehabilitation program going in. Like I'm already set, ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking into it. Also, I love the fact. I know it sounds crazy, but I love the fact that I got injured in this way, because of the fact that now it's going to make me a better coach.
Sure.
Because now I can really understand the athlete when they go through these types of situations. Right? And another guy, Kyoji Horiguchi, who just got over ACL tear. I'm able to actually rehab him based off of what I know now, based off all the research, based off how I'm feeling. And then from there, now that just makes me a better capable coach for my athletes. So it is what it is. You get better at learning things when you go through it firsthand.
Yeah. Well, because then you've learned it. You know, it's not just knowing anymore. It's like, because you can theoretically know what it's supposed to be, but then you've actually experienced it, and experience is powerful. Kind of going through it. Are you going to be, because I know you've got your YouTube channel and it's doing really well. Are you going to kind of cover some of the stuff that you're going through on your channel?
Yeah, I have actually. We did one where we went to my physical therapist and we did all that. Then I'll probably, if they let me, I think that I can pretty much video the entire surgery.
Okay.
If not, we can do like the aftermath of it and everything else.
Yeah.
But definitely gonna go through it. And then I've been showing a lot of my pre-op stuff, things like that. And then I'll go through my rehab afterwards. Yeah, for sure.
That's cool, because that's a fairly common injury. We've heard of everybody knows someone that's torn their ACL, so I think that would be super helpful to see someone like who's knowledgeable to go through it and how they how it all went through. So it'd be helpful.
Yeah, and even training, starting to train some of that rotational, like Dr. Spina. How long ago did you take that functional range conditioning?
3 years ago.
Yeah, I took it like 2 weeks ago or a week ago or something. So it's been recent. It's been recent.
Spina's been a big help.
Yeah,
I talk regularly now, and he just had the issue too as well.
Yeah, he tore his ACL. Yeah.
Yeah, he's back on his feet. I think in 5 weeks.
Wow.
Just teaching him, doing his movements. He was like, man, listen. He's like, you're doing all the right things. Do controlled articular rotations, like your life depends upon it.
Right.
And from there, I'm just like, all right, perfect. We'll do some iso ramping. I'm doing eccentric neural grooving, and these are all FRC terms. But basically, we're just trying to prime the tissue to allow it to have optimal range of motion, and then strengthen up the tissue surrounding the joint capsule. That's important for just overall stability. Because at the end of the day, my surrounding tissue and also the surrounding joints, right? They need to be moving optimally. 100%. Otherwise, there's going to be something going on there too as well. And that's usually how injuries occur. It's not, and this was a little bit different, but most of the injuries occur from having dysfunction from, opposing or opposite sides of the body. So we want to find out a way of like, okay, now we need to audit the entire movement system. And now I can do that through a joint by joint approach.
Right. And he talked about tibial rotation, which is important. You do have some end range rotation, some tibial movement. So think about yours as kind of a torsion, like a rotational type injury, right? So working that rotation is really important as well. Getting yourself in some of those when your capacity is there, when you're ready, when you're healed up enough, getting that mobility back, and also being able to control that. But yeah, it's super important. Like you said, don't just fixate on that joint. You got to look at the whole body as a whole. You have to look at the hip, the ankle mobility. You have to look at the other side, because a lot of times, if say your other ankle is bad or something, you may put increased pressure on your right knee. That's where it may end up, because that's the weak point. But
and that does happen. That happens a lot with fight sports, right? A lot of athletes, combat sport athletes, they get those imbalances happening there too as well. The asymmetries are, always prevalent in these types of athletes. So again, for me, I know my left side because I was a southpaw. My entire left hamstring is way bigger than my right hamstring. Now I'm pulling it back together. I'm balancing them out. but my right knee is the knee that got injured. You know what I mean? So it just so happens there. And then, just those imbalances we need to fix,
Yeah.
Man, I have a question just because you're talking about imbalances and stuff. And so obviously, like you were talking about earlier, fight sports, especially we're so darn tight around the chest and shoulders and everything else. And you think about boxing, you have to shell up. In jiu-jitsu, you have to shell up. In jiu-jitsu in particular, because that's, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are jiu-jitsu practitioners. What are some, and again, I know it's really hard to like generalize, because again, every person is unique, but there's some commonalities amongst those. What are some like favorite exercises or lifts that you might include for a jiu-jitsu practitioner, someone that's working out, doing jiu-jitsu a lot, to help fight against some of the rounded back posture, tight hips, and everything else that they develop?
Yeah. So again, we want to balance out the body. So we would work a lot of posterior chain work, any type of horizontal pulling, rowing. Deadlifts are also good. RDLs are mostly important too as well. I do like the hip bridge for a specific reason of just building up the hamstrings, the glutes. I'm not big into doing that as what we call an indicator lift, which is basically a max effort compound lift. I don't like to load the hips that much. I don't think it's necessary. But what I will say is I can use it for a hypertrophy builder, right? A builder of strength endurance in those cases. Also, kettlebell swings are very important for me. When it comes down to having the ability to relax and contract, rapidly and do that for time, that's very important too. I take a lot from Pavel Tsatsouline on that perspective of just having the ability to have anti-glycolytic conditioning, where you're actually having the ability to produce power for a long duration. That's very important. But it also works the posterior chain. So you're looking from the back all the way down to the hamstrings. We want to build that up because, and especially if they are primarily playing from guard, they are pulled forward. They're anterior dominant. A lot of the times they have tight psoas. They have tight hip flexors. So we need to make sure we're working the antagonistic muscles there to improve on opening up that range of motion and getting those muscles activated back there, so you don't have those problems in the low back, don't have groin injuries and things like that. So a lot of those are important. Hamstring curls, GHRs. We do a lot of sled dragging, primarily walking forward with a hamstring pull upright. I take a lot of my stuff from one of my mentors, Louis Simmons. Take a lot of stuff from Westside Barbell, obviously. So we do a lot of sled drags. We do a lot of reverse hypers if we have the access to the equipment there. Glute ham raise, like I said. And then from a core perspective, like a trunk strengthening perspective, I do a lot of anti-rotation and a lot of anti-flexion work too as well. We can strengthen up those muscles there that allow for rotation to occur. Also, it allows you to stay stable inside of someone's guard too as well. So if you're looking not to get swept, you want to maintain stability in the transverse plane. So we'll work on things like Palov presses. Right. And, I do a thing called a kettlebell pull through, where we're working on the muscles of serratus anterior, working on the obliques, we're working on that there in an anti-rotation state. And then again, your average planks and side planks too are very important for us as well.
Awesome.
The kettlebell pull through is your quadruped or on hands and toes and pulling through. And trying to limit your rotation. Push-up position. Right.
Yeah, almost like an arm drag, right? You're pulling through the kettlebell, arm drag.
Those are great, man. They're good for so many reasons. I mean, you're activating that. You're talking about those shoulder blade muscles. You're activating that, and you're also doing anti-rotation. You're stabilizing on the opposite arm as well. I mean, it's just a great overall exercise for just – it hits it checks a lot of boxes. It's a good one.
I mean, other things like the Turkish get-up I think is important. You know what I mean? That's obviously some of its shoulder stability. To a degree, I mean, a lot of my guys lack the coordination just yet, but a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, they understand it because they move like that in a way, right? They have to get up off the ground. It's like you're basically getting out of a position at that point, right? So from that, it's like a technical stand-up, right? It's with the kettlebell overhead. So now you're working shoulder stability, and then you're working all of those muscles to have to stabilize the body and then move through space. So you're working on proprioception, kinesthetic awareness, and then control and stability throughout the entire body, which is very important. So it's an all-in-one. And then band pull-aparts are also key. I also like to do a lot of, let's say, what is it? I like to do retraction exercises, wall slides, prone swimmers, YWTs, all of that back there to pull that upper back into place, right? Because a lot of times the reason why a lot of these guys have lower back issues is because they're kyphotic, because they're rolled forward. So for that fixes a lot of that lower back issue and a lot of that tightness in the QL, because we actually get to pull that body in a better, postural position.
Yep. Yeah, no, I had a similar issue a few years ago, man, like maybe about almost 6, 7. This is where I started kind of going down this path of figuring out what was wrong with me. I had a lower back issue. I mean, I'd go for like a walk for like an hour, and all of a sudden, like my back would seize up. I was like most people, it's my lower back, I need to stretch it or something, right? So people think. And it was because weak hamstrings and glutes, and then the back was always rounding, so I had to strengthen the back so I could actually stand up straight. Now I don't. And then you get that hip extension, loosen up the psoas, loosen up those hip flexors, and then everything it feels better now. Because again, you're strengthening the cause of it. And speaking of which, man, just kind of to segue into it, it's a perfect time, I think, because you've got a program out, and I actually bought it when it was coming out because it had been a bunch of promotional stuff. It's a good program.
Did you really?
Yeah, I bought it. I was because I'm curious, man. I'm like, because just like you, I'm like, some guys talking about it. I saw your channel. Oh, it's some good stuff. Let's check it out. And it's a good program. You guys have included some of that articular rotation stuff, because I started playing around with it, and then Eugene was like, oh, I'm going to that thing. He was talking about going to the program. But what's the name of it again? I forgot, and you can kind of talk more about it.
Yeah. So the BJJ program is called Ground Control.
Yeah.
And I named it because it's like one of my favorite gis. Yeah, you remember the Ground Control gis?
Yeah, I had one. My buddy, I forgot his name, Justin, I think it was. I was down in Vero, because my old coach was down in Vero Beach, and I was down there training with him. And then Hanato Tavares was actually he was actually who I got my black belt from back in the day. And
really?
Yeah, way back in the day. So I was down there training with him for the Miami Open back in like 2011, and Justin gave, I think it's Justin. Was it Justin? That owned it, I think. I can't remember his name. But he gave me he gave me one of the gis to rock, which I liked. And then I'm a dumbass. I'm a black belt at this point, and I was going down there to compete. I forget my black belt, so he gave me a ground control black belt. So it was cool, but it was a good gi. And I actually really liked the belt. The belt was like kind of like it's like a really thick gi material belt instead of the traditional belt. But yeah, it's a good gi.
Nice, yeah, man. I love that gi, man. I love the competing in it. It's super light, you know. I still have one, matter of fact. You can't really find them anymore, but so I decided to call it Ground Control. It was like the best, catchiest name I could come up with.
Yeah, it's a perfect name for it. Yeah. And then what's the website? So if someone's interested in checking this stuff out, because again, if you guys have listened to him, a lot of the stuff that he's talking about, it's in that. So if you're digging it, go check it out. What's the website for it?
Yeah, so my website is darustrong.com. Very simple.
Cool.
And then, so you've got you had some other stuff in there, right? You have some other programs as well? You have like a boxing program or MMA program?
I have a boxing program called Heavy Hitter. Okay. That's an 8-week program. I have Fight Ready, which is a 12-week MMA program. And I also have Fight Strong 365, which is a year-long program that I partnered up with Fight Camp Conditioning on. And those are all available on my website too as well.
That's awesome, man. We appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's awesome.
It was a good time. And I mean, obviously those are your products and stuff, but where else can people can sort of check you out and sort of follow you with your ACL surgery and all that stuff going on?
I mean, primarily on my Instagram, it's @DaruStrong, and then my Twitter is @DaruStrong too as well. That's pretty much it there. And then my YouTube channel, Phil Daru Strong, which really I'm putting a lot of video content on that too. I'm trying to follow your footsteps, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, dude, and you're putting good stuff out there. One of my boxing coaches the other day, he's a young guy who's was a fighter and stuff like that, and he's teaching some of the classes. He was like, "Yeah, I'm looking at this guy's stuff because you had some drills on there or something like that." So he was having his guys go through some of the drills, man. So you're putting out some good stuff, and you're making an impact, brother.
That's awesome, man.
It's good. What do you have coming up, like fighters wise? Do you got anybody? Joanna's fighting, correct, for the title?
Yeah.
Is that in China?
Yeah.
Where is that?
That's in Vegas.
Oh, Vegas. Okay, good thing you don't want to go to China with probably stuff going on over there.
Nope.
You'd be fighting in masks probably.
Nope, I don't want to do that. I'm good. Yeah, no, we got Joanna. I have a couple of guys. Edson might be following up sometime soon, and we're trying to get Dustin a fight soon in April.
Yeah.
And then my other guys that are fighting on the lower level promotions, and I think it's pretty much it right now. I got roughly 11 guys in camp right now.
Wow, man.
And then 40 of them are kind of waiting for a fight. So
40?
Keep you busy, man.
Yeah.
Golly.
Oh my God, it's a lot.
I have 10 boxers. I have 10 professional boxers. One is fighting on the undercard of the Tyson Fury undercard.
Oh wow, that's a good one.
Yeah, and then I have two judo Olympians that are away right now. They're in Paris, and then I'm getting them ready for the 2020 Olympics.
Awesome, man.
Cool, man. Appreciate you being on the podcast, brother. It was fun.
Yes, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Best of luck with everything. Best of luck with surgery.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it.
All right,
All right, guys.
take care, man. Thank you.
Cool. All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast with Phil. Again, that was a solid one. There's some really good stuff in there. Like I said, I was being dead honest. I actually used this program, the ground control. I forgot the name. I knew it was something like ground control-esque, so I knew it was something like that. But I got the program because I thought it was interesting. I wanted to see what he had up his sleeve. Because again, coaching that many high-level fighters, I knew he was going to have some good stuff. So again, I encourage you to check it out if that sort of thing is interesting to you. Like if you want to get into the realm of like physical conditioning, just like because again, as you do jiu-jitsu, I say this all the time in my videos. Your physical vehicle, the thing, your body, that machine, that beautiful biological machine, that is the thing that you navigate jiu-jitsu with, right? And so if that thing's in good shape, it's strong, it's healthy, you're only going to be better at jiu-jitsu for it, whereas if you don't take good care of it, it's going to break down on you and you can say goodbye to jiu-jitsu. That's just the way it is. And so I encourage you guys to not just be a black belt with your technical ability, but I also encourage you to put forth the same sort of focus on learning and taking in new information in the realm of diet and exercise and stretching and everything else that goes into this stuff, because it's very important. It's stuff that honestly for me, I wish I could go back. Like one of the things like I always get asked is people say, Chewy, what would you tell yourself to do if you were like a white belt, and again, the mental lessons, you got to be ready for those are the way they were, but I would go back and tell myself to do some of the stretching, some of the strengthening exercises that I do now. I would go back and tell myself to do that stuff back then because it would have helped my body a lot more. I wouldn't have had the injuries that I did. Not that I had a ton, I didn't have that many bad ones, but again, it would have been really helpful. And so again, I encourage you guys to be students, not just of your technical ability, but also your physical ability. It's very important. So anyway, guys, again, as always, if you want to support the podcast, check out Charlotte's Web, charlottesweb.com, and you can put in the promo code Chewjitsu to save 15% on your order on whatever you want to get, whether it be those delicious gummies or some of the tinctures. They got a bunch of new flavors out. I still like the mint chocolate, I think the best. The lemon twist is pretty good too. And then again, like I said earlier in the podcast, I've got the shorts and I wear them and I've got the rash guards. You can check it out, epicroll.com, and use the promo code Chewjitsu to save 15% on a rash guard or shorts, whatever it is that you want to buy from them. And I think that's it. So, guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.